Right, shall we get started? Woo! No whooping and hollering today? No? Okay, we'll try. Okay, so welcome to the afternoon sessions. It's good that everyone's still here. Sometimes after lunch, a lot of people disappear. They just eat the food and then go. But you're sticking around for the drinks at the end, I assume? Yeah, okay. Right, so for those of you that haven't met me before, my name's Rob and I work at Combined Knowledge. It's good that Pladis had a really good experience with the training. Oh, I've got two mics. Okay, there we go. Thanks. It was good that Pladis had a really good experience with the training because they did ask some kind of tough questions of us. Could we do the training like next week? Can we just start now? We've decided we're going to go for it. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. The session today that I'm going to be working with you on for the next 45 minutes or so is actually with a company called Mundipharma, and Maria's going to introduce herself in a moment and tell you a little bit about Mundipharma. It's another case study. Yeah, so it's a story about changing from an old one version of SharePoint to a different version of SharePoint. This one is more SharePoint focused, so you weren't dealing with SharePoint Online at the time. So that kind of changed the challenges and allowed you to focus in on the SharePoint piece without worrying about these teams and groups and this other stuff that we're wrestling with. I am going to talk about teams and groups and all the latest things in a session that I'm doing later on today. Okay. So this is more traditional on-premises, and then later on we're going to do the new pieces. So Maria, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
So, sorry, can you hear me?
Should swap over?
So, Mundipharma IT Services is a service provider for Mundipharma, which is a pharmaceutical company with independent associated companies globally. So we're located in 51 countries, and 23 of those companies are in Europe. So a little bit about myself.
Spacebar.
Spacebar. A little bit about myself. I've been working for Mundipharma group of companies since 1998, so it's nearly 19 years, and I've had a variety of roles. I'm currently working as a business partner, and I look after our R&D organisation and all the data management implementations. I've been involved in SharePoint since 2002, when we first looked to deploy SharePoint 2003. And since then, I've always done some work within SharePoint. I've never been able to shake off that "you're the SharePoint expert" tag, and I've always had people coming up to me, regardless of what role I've had in the organisation, people coming up to me and asking me questions and for support around SharePoint, which has hopefully changed now with this the way that we've done our user adoption.
And again, so just to confirm, so my name's Rob. I've worked at Combined Knowledge now for over 8 years, and basically the sort of projects that we've been talking about so far today, where people are either new to SharePoint or new to Office 365, or they're moving from an old version of SharePoint to a new version, or from SharePoint to 365, or some combination. I think I'm very lucky. I get to work with these companies that are really enthused about having these upgrades, and they're looking forward to their new functionality. And they're really passionate about this, and these are the customers we really love to work with. So I get to write books, record training videos, and actually do a lot of the training as well, so visiting people and helping them understand all these different systems. Does anyone think SharePoint's fully intuitive yet? Just install it and everyone will understand it? So that's kind of good for me. I'm thinking as a training company, it's quite good for me. Eventually Microsoft will do me out of a job, but they're nowhere near it yet. So we can help translate these potentially wonderful systems into, useful things that save you time and make life easier and give you a little bit less stress in your day-to-day work. All the things that we hope for from a good computer system.
Okay. So before I go on to the what we've done and how we've done it, I picked out this slide or this picture from the internet, which kind of sums up how we've worked with SharePoint and all our systems in the past. So I'll let you read that for yourselves, but where it says our new CRM system, that could be any system we've deployed from our IT department. So people were really good. We've been really good at deploying new systems, but we haven't been very good at decommissioning systems and stopping people using what they've always used in the past.
Yeah, we see this a lot. So companies that have had the new system for about 5 years, and they still think of it as this distant thing. It's the new system that we've not quite moved into yet.
Yeah.
So 5 years having gone live, so obviously that's a little bit worrying.
Okay, so back in 2002, when we were implementing SharePoint 2003, this is what we wanted. We wanted to enable better collaboration within our independent associated structure of companies. We wanted to reduce network file storage, reduce email traffic. We were using e-rooms for project collaboration, and we wanted to remove those as well. So we implemented SharePoint, and it was successful. We had lots and lots of SharePoint sites. So we had 566 top-level sites. Each one of those had a sub-site, and some of those had more than one sub-site between them, so hundreds and hundreds of SharePoint sites. And one of the main reasons that people took to SharePoint was we got a new general manager in 2004, and people saw SharePoint as a way of letting our new general manager know what they were doing. It was almost they used SharePoint as a tool to promote their department and to promote what they did. And each site looked very different. There was a lot of one-upmanship between departments and the independent associated companies. So it was all, my site's got to look better than that one. Mine's got to do a lot more than that one. There was lots of that. Okay, so...
Which we think was partly a good thing.
You would, but there was a lot of customization, lots and lots of customizations in those 2003 and 2007 sites as well. So what we ended up with, we didn't actually reduce any file storage. So we had lots of, like I mentioned, lots of different site structures, lots of different look and feel. So if you're a new person in our organisation and you had access to maybe 3 or 4 different sites, sometimes more than that, they would all look completely different. You would have to relearn how to find information, how to upload information, on where to upload this information on all these different sites. We just got more and more duplication. People just saw SharePoint as another place to store documents. It wasn't a replacement for anything. So we hadn't really done our job too well. So an example of this was our, so even more places to store information. So an example of this was, as I mentioned earlier, our R&D organisation, I've worked really closely with, and they did things slightly differently. So when they implemented SharePoint 2003, they thought about it really deep and hard, and they looked at their processes, and they did have a structure. So they had a projects area, a departments area, and an area where they shared information on travel, hotels, and other news. But the thing about the R&D organisation is they were based in 2 locations. So we have an office in Cambridge in the UK and an office in Limburg in Germany, and the R&D organisation was split between those 2 locations. There was a push from the top, so the general manager in R&D asked everybody to use SharePoint to collaborate. So we got that push from the top, and it was used. Within the R&D organisation, people were using SharePoint for the right reasons. They didn't stop using anything else, but they did use SharePoint. So I, as a business, in my business analysis time, I, again, supporting the R&D function, and where SharePoint seemed to be really successful, and that's the feedback I got from the various site owners, talking to the users of SharePoint, I kind of got a different story. They weren't using it as it was intended to be used. So I needed to get some more information on this, as being responsible for looking at their processes and trying to streamline their processes. It was quite worrying to know that people where something could be done in 2 steps, they were doing it in 20 steps. So I held a workshop and invited the key stakeholders in and asked some questions. So again, as I mentioned earlier, SharePoint was just being used as another place to store documentation. People were using SharePoint to pick up information, but that's it. They weren't using it. They weren't using the version histories. They weren't using the workflows within SharePoint. They were just using it as another dumping area. Mundipharma Research had 192 sites in their portal, and some of those hadn't been touched since they'd been started. So we had to convince Mundipharma Research to move off to SharePoint 2003 and move into another, to a more up-to-date version. But we had to convince them that we didn't want to move them, we didn't want to keep them working in exactly the same way. So what they wanted was to move to an updated version, but keep exactly the same structure that they already had, because they believed it worked. So we had to prove to them that it wasn't working. So I don't know if any of you work with R&D departments in your organisations, but R&D love facts and figures. So we had to collect some facts and figures for them. So these are some of the figures.
Okay, yeah, okay. So it's a bit of a quiz and there's chocolate to be won.
Do we
like chocolate?
As prizes.
Yeah. Okay, we get big on chocolates. Oh, it could be an issue, but we'll say it's okay. So can anyone guess? So the big number at the top left, what's that? 1.2 million. So can anyone guess? But stored where? In like OneDrive, SharePoint? File shares.
Share drive.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Right, shall I give out? Do you want to give out the chocolate? Yeah, that's the bad story. So as Maria was saying saying before, even where people were using SharePoint to begin with, they were just using it as another network drive, so they weren't getting any benefits of having SharePoint. They got these licenses and installed it and rolled it out, but actually at that point, a lot of the stuff, people didn't know any difference whether it was on a network drive or a SharePoint site. They just thought it was the same. Apart from the normal joke, what's the joke when people say, what's the difference between network drives and SharePoint? SharePoint's slower. No, better. It's a joke, it's not true. It's not true. It's not true, it's a joke.
Okay. So the next biggest number there, 169,393. I'll give you the answer to this because we've only got another two boxes of chocolates.
Okay.
So these were the amount of folders and subfolders on the network drives, and there's an average of 7 files per folder. So you can imagine, and the permissions on these folders were all completely different. So you can imagine if somebody wanted to find some information, unless they knew where it was, they were completely stuck. Okay.
And then what have we got?
So
I don't know if anyone's going to guess this 119. I think that might be an impossible question.
Yeah. Okay, so the R&D organisation use a number of systems to store information. Some of these systems are core systems. It's where we keep our clinical trials, clinical submissions, our regulatory information. They're systems that we are heavily audited on. So external agencies come in and make sure that we have the right data and that we're doing the right things around patient safety. So the 119 number is the number of systems that R&D use to store information. Now bear in mind the R&D was in 2 locations, in Limburg and in Cambridge. Some of these systems were doing exactly the same thing. So they might have a finance system used in Cambridge by the finance department, another one used in Limburg by the finance department, and there could be an additional one used in our drug safety department. So they had lots of different systems using the for the same purpose, and what they would do is send each other attachments or they'd export the data into a spreadsheet, send it round as an attachment to check that the information was correct. So 119 R&D systems. Can anyone guess which number on there is the number of core systems? So the number of systems that contained core R&D information. Sorry, who? 14. Who said 14?
It was the only one left, to be fair to him. All the other numbers had come out.
It was 14. So the other bit of research I did was around, I wanted to find a piece of information relating to one of our products. So one of the numbers here relates to the number of places, open access places, that I could find information relating to one of our products. And I don't have access to all the network drives. I don't have access to, I work in an IT department, I don't have access to all the SharePoint sites. But one of these numbers signifies the place I could find general information relating to one of our products. 27. That's 27. I don't know who said it first. It wasn't me. I'll take it as no one's going to win. I won't put it.
Go on.
Okay.
You can be the best loser.
Thank you.
So there's 27 locations that I could find about one of our products. The worrying number on there is that's 7, and that's the number of places I could find patient safety update records which should never have been on our network drives. So that's kind of okay. They were in the right location, so I don't want to worry anybody about any of the drugs we produce. They were also in the right location, but they were elsewhere and they shouldn't have been there. Okay, so we had all these numbers which were, obviously causing a problem, but I needed to show the powers that be what the impact of all these numbers were. So there were two different things that people were complaining about. One of them was that they were finding too much information when they were looking for it, and the other one was that they weren't finding any information. So around what happens when people find too much data, I mentioned earlier about the finance systems and the finance departments, but what people in the workshop told me is that if somebody asked for some information and they needed it quickly, what they would have to do was, obviously they found lots and lots of, Excel spreadsheets relating to whatever product they were needed to find. And then they would spend lots and lots of time and effort making sure that the information that they'd found was the right version and it was correct. So that took up a lot of resources. The other problem was they didn't find information, so as part of our R&D process, what we tried to do is buy in assets from other companies so that we could then do the clinical trials and market them ourselves. And this is a comment that came from one of our associate project managers. So they know they'd done some due diligence work in the past, but they just couldn't find the information, and sometimes it ended up with them having to do it again. So these are some facts about our due diligence projects. This was data in 2015. Each project could cost up to £100,000 because we go through a process, and then obviously if we find that product isn't worth marketing or isn't going to make us a profit, we will pull away straight away. It can take between 2 weeks and 1 year, and most of our executive members are involved in that due diligence process. So these were the business problems that were occurring because of the way that our data was being managed. Okay. So there was big learnings. Again, another picture. I'm not quite sure if everyone can see that. This one's around SharePoint. Okay. So when we were looking to implement, what we had, well, it wasn't just an IT problem. I mean, lots of people have said it today. It's a change management, user adoption issue. So some of the key things that we learned was that we needed, if we were going to be implementing a new IT system or an updated version of SharePoint, we needed to change behaviours. We couldn't let people continue to do what they'd always done in the past and just use a newer version as another place to share information. So we needed some governance as well. So we needed to let people know where they could and couldn't save key pieces of business information. Again, and they couldn't just continue to use a piece of software just because that was the thing they liked using the most. Information had to be in the right place. And we needed help with doing this. It couldn't be driven from IT. We needed people within the business to help us with this change. So we recruited some champions or change agents and some champions to help us with this. And put together a plan. So we needed to work out what our goal was for our implementation of SharePoint 2003 and what actions we were going to take to ensure we reached our goals. So we wanted to lead by example, again, as part of the change management adoption cycle. Have these key people in the business that others would follow. Not dancing, but no. So we wanted to consolidate the data and put all the right data in the right place, remove any duplication, and if we did move to SharePoint 2013, we needed to turn off the network drives and make them read-only so that people didn't continue to save in them. Again, changing behaviours and increase the use, and training needed to be a part of that. So a lot of the time when I was speaking to users within the business, they all felt that a lot of them felt they didn't need SharePoint training. They'd been using it for a long time and that they didn't need any additional training. And I think you come back with some examples of that later. And we needed to, again, we had a new group of people coming into the workforce who use social media all the time. We needed to fit in with their way of working. So these guys don't share information in a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. They'll Facebook each other, or they'll do something, write a blog about stuff they've done. We needed to fit in with the way that they worked. And the key thing was we needed to ensure that there was confidence in the data that people were finding, and they didn't need to check and recheck that what they had was right, because it was costing the business time and money. So this is when we looked for somebody to help us with the training, and we needed a partner to work with us, and we had quite a few requirements. So we wanted somebody who would understand the way that we'd set up SharePoint and what we were able and not able to do using the tool. And our legal department had a lot of say in that. So there were some things that we had to turn off, and it was pointless a training company coming in and telling people about those features that they were never going to be able to use in our environment. We needed the training to include our business processes as well as the tool itself. So they needed to allow us time to include that as part of the training. We wanted it to be at our premises if possible. We didn't want to keep flying people to different locations to do this training. And we wanted a group of people to be trained together so that they could support each other following the training. And we wanted it to be flexible. We wanted to, if we changed our mind about something, that whoever we chose as a training partner would allow us to do that. So we picked Combined Knowledge because they ticked all the boxes, and I'll let Rob talk you through what he's done with us.
So one of the things, just to pick up on what you were saying there, Maria, the idea that you had to switch a few things off, partly that was because of the offices in Germany, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So
very strong workers' council there who will not let them use all the tools.
Yeah, and particularly anything that monitored people, anything where you could see someone's status or availability or how long they'd spent on anything, any form of reporting where you'd think, well, that would be useful to know what's going on. The workers' council are not keen on that, not one bit. Yeah, so all those reporting elements had to go. Okay, so from my point of view then, working with Mundipharma for the last couple of years, so one of the things that we understood from them straight away is that they didn't want to repeat their old mistakes. They knew what they'd ended up with last time, which was kind of some adoption of SharePoint, but still a lot of people using the network drives. So they're very keen to not fall into the same traps. There's a few other things that they'd got going on as well. So one of the old problems they'd got was also people using SharePoint for the wrong reasons. So at the start of all the training sessions, we actually had Katrina join us in the session, and she would come in and she would actually, as part of a 15-minute to 20-minute intro, she would make sure that within the business people knew what type of files should live in SharePoint and what shouldn't, and there was also clear documentation to account for that. So people from the word go knew that was completely critical to them. It sounds really small, but just knowing what they should and shouldn't do helps them decide when should they be using SharePoint. So that was baked in at the start of all the live sessions. Katrina would join us, or someone from Mundipharma, and actually really bring that home to people. Actually, to be honest, with the training sessions we've done with other companies as well, some of the most successful classes is where it is a mixture of people from internal in the business and then us coming in as well. So the people within the businesses themselves have all the internal knowledge, they know how to describe things, they know about the troublemakers in the business, so they know how to talk to those troublemakers. And then we could come in and have the knowledge around the actual business systems, so we can work together to make that happen. Also, all the small things as well. If we're going to educate people about SharePoint in this case, putting everything into place to make it as effortless as possible for the people to attend. Quite often with training, people will drop out of it, right? A lot of people think of it as low on their priority list. If you say to people, oh, there's a training session, they'll often say, oh, no, I'm busy already. So we've got to put everything in place to make it as easy as possible for them to attend the training. So everything from trying to make it as local to them as possible, getting them into a nice training room with air conditioning, having hands-on exercises so they can practice things during the session if that's what they want to do, or letting them just watch if they prefer to do that, because that's the thing as well. Giving them books that are relevant to them, so rather than just generic information, it's customised to them, so when they follow it, it matches, it's got their colour scheme, if there's a different colour scheme even. Providing a community, so that was something you were quite keen on as well. During the sessions, you were saying to people, you'll be here to support people as well after the sessions, but actually the people that had attended the sessions together would become a community and they could help each other. And even free food. So during the sessions, that's a bribe. Would you call it a bribe? Tell people there will be food during the sessions, and they're much more enthused when they turn up. It's worth it. So collectively, we can kind of break that into 4 different areas, and basically you were trying to hit all those 4 areas. So for example here we go. So from a training point of view, we did mostly classroom-based training, which was bespoke. And actually it was, you went for 3 days, didn't you? A lot of your classes were kind of 3-day sessions. And that's because quite a lot was going to be expected of these people, wasn't it? they were going to be effectively site owners or almost site collection owners, actually, administrators, and they were going to be expected or required to do quite a lot. So they got 3 days rather than in a lot of places they'd only get maybe half a day. You looked at the business alignment, so you'd understood, I knew this was ambitious. Let's try again. So you knew the old problems that you had and that you were trying to avoid, and you knew what you were trying to do. And you talked to the business about that. And one of the things you said right at the start of the session was if you talk to people that had been closely involved with the first version of SharePoint rolling out, they'd all declared it a success. So kind of the site owners at that local level thought it was great, but actually when you talk to the end users that are actually using it, they said, no, we don't use it, or we don't really trust it. We're going to put everything in SharePoint and on the X drive. And again, this was several months after the go live. So they'd never got the confidence, or they'd never had that push to get them off the network drive, a bribe or a push. There's, what is it, carrot and stick. Yeah. So depending on which works in your business. The user engagement, so that idea of that continual communication, making sure they know this is coming, when's it coming, what's going to be the benefits. Actually, by the time they got to us in the classroom, they were already quite enthused about it. They were quite looking forward to having an upgraded system. So they'd missed a couple of versions, going to the 2013 version at the time. So that meant that as they got into the classroom, they were already thinking the right positive things. And some of them had their old sites and wanted to make them better. Something that actually you did that worked pretty well for that I've not seen many other companies do, is where people had the old sites, those sites were imported across as sub-sites. So people got a new site in the new system, and their old site and the data in it came across as a sub-site. So that then, it's an interesting idea, a bit different, isn't it? So that meant then people had all their data straight away from day one, and then they could bring data from their sub-sites up to their main sites. So that meant that you didn't have to bring across the old look and feels and the old structures completely, because you were quite keen to get away from these folders, these kind of empty folders that are everywhere. So it's a slightly different way of doing it. And then the support, so making sure that people had available to them, whether it be training materials, videos, contact details, so if they have a problem at any level, they know that they're safe, they're not out there on their own. So altogether that then ramped up the adoption. Yeah, so that was good. It's pretty, isn't it? I had to use that. I can't do this session and not use that. Right.
Okay. So these are some of the things that we have implemented in the new Insight portal, which is what the R&D company use. So we're using the blogs, I said, and these are regularly being updated by champions or anybody else within R&D that wants to update them. We're using these feeds for online support, and again, this is where people will go to get some hints and tips on how to use relevant features in SharePoint. And again, these are constantly being updated. The other thing we did around
go back.
Okay, is again around changing behaviours. We've implemented these screensavers, and this is all around not the system itself, but the behaviours. So telling people, I can't read all. Ensuring there are links and not document attachments in emails, etc. So these are constant, regular reminders for people. Again, regular updates, lots of, try to make them as fun as possible. So do's and don'ts, latest news feeds. And again, what the Insight or SharePoint 2013 user community wanted, or the site owners wanted, was for SharePoint to be seen as a key tool alongside those other systems that were being used. So they wanted it to be the place that people went to for information on anything. So these badges here are icons for other systems. So Athena is our regulatory submission tool, and it's a documentum system. But people will come here into SharePoint to find out hints and tips on how to use that system. And do you see the what's happening area there? There's some competitiveness as well. So people are can be named experts in this.
Can the German users use that?
They do. They can use it if they choose to use
Okay.
it. You can't tell them to use it. But if they choose to use it, that's okay. So we've done a lot around user adoption, and it is much better than it has been in the past. We've still got a long way to go. We're still continuously doing things around user adoption. So we don't want to just stay still. We want to continue increasing the levels of knowledge. We want to regularly update what we have now and implement regular upgrades. And the only way we can do that is with that governance. So we're not customizing anything. It's all out of the box SharePoint. And those people that have customized SharePoint 2013 sites, following attending a training course, they've asked us to remove their customizations because they can't do what Rob is training them to do.
I think with some of the really old versions of SharePoint, there just wasn't much functionality, so people were having to be creative and downloading bits of code that they found off of blog sites and things like that. And then when they see the newer versions of SharePoint and they see the search is good and they see that the document management is good and the workflow is good, they're thinking, well, I don't really need to use workarounds anymore, which is what they had to do in the past. So as soon as they've seen, the training that shows them this is now possible, they're sort of looking at their old sites and going, oh God, not very happy with it anymore. I thought it was fine, and now they're embracing that new updated. But they're seeing it as a positive, aren't they? So they're seeing that it's going to be much easier for them to use.
So the other thing we're planning on doing is the lunch and learns, which are run by our SharePoint champions, so that they can share information and train users on key features that they want to. We're looking at implementing a document management community user group, and we don't want to call it a SharePoint community group. It's got to be a data document management user group, because SharePoint is one of the many key tools that we use. And the dates here, the list of departments and dates here is the date that they last used a network drive. So, and that aligns to when they got a new SharePoint site. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions? It's Kirsten.
You didn't mention how many users.
So we've got the Mundipharma group of companies has 4,500 users, and MITS, the IT associated company, supports 3,500 of them.
Thank you.
Did you have to get specific approval from a security point of view of putting some of these documents in a cloud service?
Sorry. So did we have to get approval from security for some of the documentation that we're holding in SharePoint?
To move it to the cloud, none of it's in the cloud at the moment.
None of this is in the cloud. We will be moving to the cloud, and we're looking at that at the moment. I don't think we will, of course, seek approval, but the information that we're keeping on SharePoint isn't information that relates to either patient safety or any of the studies that are carried out. They're kept in other systems. So these are more
guidelines for what people should use for what.
That's right, and that's one of the things. The start of every training course we did for these champions, we did loads of courses for those. At the start of that course, every time was what you should put in here and what you should not, because that was a key lessons learned. So at the start of every session, that was before we even logged in, that was the key message right at the beginning.
You didn't have any GXP data?
not in SharePoint. Well, we did have in SharePoint 2003, but which we shouldn't have done, but not in the newer versions.
When you closed down all the shared drives, did you get much pushback from staff? Because I assume they had ways of working that use the shared drives. Or?
Yeah, we have. I think they recognised the issues that we were having with the network drives. There has been some pushback, But that's where our champions will come in and help them with that change in their behaviours. We've had to lock them down so that people don't save any additional information on them. They can still access what's there currently.
Yeah, so that was a compromise where people could still access the data and it was read-only, but that also meant you didn't have to migrate a lot of the old data, which was not valid anymore, into the new system. So it was a compromise for now, but I think a good compromise.
Your continuous improvements, did you have a SharePoint governance team? Committee?
We started off with a SharePoint governance team, and they've written up some documentation that they're currently updating again. But yeah.
So if you wanted to turn on, if you wanted to turn on Excel services, how would you go about it?
We'd have to write the business case for it, and it doesn't have to be a long document, but we would have to state the business benefits for implementing Excel services in this case, or any new feature in SharePoint. That would get sent to our design team in IT, and they would look at whether we've already got a solution out there that would fulfill those business needs. If we haven't, then they would implement the additional feature. So it has to go through a process, and the key thing is there has to be a business benefit and business value from any new thing we implement.
Yeah, I'm just curious about your approach migrating the data from the old platform into subsites of the new SharePoint 2013. Do you think that worked? Did people understand where they should be saving data? Did they copy it across, or did they have two locations to store their data now?
No, so what we did when we migrated the older sites to a sub-site, we made that read-only again. So they weren't able to save any new information in the older sites. And if they needed any of the current information, they had to save it back to the top level site.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the main thing it meant was you didn't, as a company, you didn't have to have a lot of discussions with people about, does this one file need to come across, or this one file, or this one file. There was some high-level stuff done, but didn't have to do it for every individual site, for every individual file. So that speeds things up. The only other thing that I would say in reality, has anyone ever tried copying a file from a sub-site to a top-level site in SharePoint? Yeah, so there's a little bit of pain there, but it would be a one-off thing, right? So people get their data straight away, which is what they wanted. Then they could grab the files and move them from their sub-site, or copy them from their sub-site to the top-level site, and then they'd be up and running.
Did they do that with File Explorer, or was it using?
Basically, yes. Basically, that is the easiest way. Without adding something in or putting a workflow or whatever else, they could use the File Explorer, and that would let them do it. Should we do one more question? It's good to be popular, isn't it, Ray?
With the migration, did you consider metadata, or is metadata something that you don't look at all?
Some of the departments were using metadata, and we didn't copy that across. We are using
Managed
metadata in the new sites, and yeah, that is something we're doing.
Yeah, but the old version wouldn't have had managed metadata anyway, so we couldn't have been a like for like. Mostly folders.
So a lot of people were using SharePoint in exactly the same way they were using network drives. It was folders and subfolders within that.
Just wondering whether you took advantage of that opportunity to introduce metadata that would be useful to the corporation as a whole.
There is. So the main, there's if we simplify it, there's two site templates that they use. There's a generic one, which people can just use for working as a team. It's just got document libraries and generic stuff in. Then there's another site template which actually is quite locked down, isn't it, to some extent, which is for projects, which has a series of columns, a series of views, and a whole load of nice things that come off the back of that around search as well. So I think it's a good decision. Have one area that's managed and structured, and people get a template, and that's been a lot of thought went into that template to get it right, and then have an area where people can create these team sites that were more customizable. So yeah, you are making good use of the the managed metadata.
Yeah.
That's that question. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.